The chamber buzzed with an uneasy anticipation, as if history itself were holding its breath. Velvet chairs lined the high-ceilinged room, portraits of former presidents hanging like silent witnesses to another battle for the soul of the Republic. Cameras whirred. Laptops clacked. Aides moved like shadows. Then came the crack of the gavel. Order. The chair, jaw tight, signaled for opening remarks, but eyes weren't on him. They were on two women seated across the aisle from one another, Marjorie Taylor Greene, her face set like stone, a stack of papers before her like makeshift armor, and Jasmine Crockett, calm, unreadable, her fingers lightly resting on a single folder labeled Truth. Greene moved first. Her voice rang out, soaked in disdain. "We're here because Democrats keep weaponizing justice. You want to talk about election interference? Let's talk about the deep state, the DOJ, and George Soros." She leaned back smugly. The cameras zoomed in. Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She waited. Then she stood, slow and deliberate, as if every inch upright added weight to the room. Her voice was low at first, more breath than sound. "You mentioned George Soros before you mentioned the Constitution." The chamber went silent. She walked toward the mic. "You invoked Antifa, Hunter Biden, CRT, but not once did you invoke Article 1. Not once did you reference Section 4. Not once did you cite law because you don't know it." Greene interrupted, indignant. "Don't lecture me." But Crockett didn't pause. Her eyes locked onto Greene's. "You can shout conspiracies all day, but let me tell you something." She stepped forward. "You can't cite what you've never read." Gasps. A single phone camera caught Greene's stunned expression. The hearing had just begun, but the war had already turned. And from behind the curtain of noise, one could almost hear Trump, watching somewhere, seething. Chapter 1. The Setup. A divided committee and a stacked panel. The day had started with protocol, badges scanned, IDs verified, coffee cups clutched like talismans of routine. But this wasn't a routine session. Everyone knew it. The House Oversight Committee had never been more fractured, nor its agenda more volatile. It was a hearing meant to dissect election integrity and the aftermath of January 6th. But the underlying current was vengeance, for power lost, for narratives undone, for a country slipping further into itself. Marjorie Taylor Greene arrived early. Her team hustled behind her, dropping stacks of documents onto her desk. Printed tweets, debunked news clippings, screen grabs of Facebook rants. She looked like a general arriving at a battlefield armed with paper swords. Crockett arrived differently. Quiet, solo, no entourage, just a single brown leather folder tucked under her arm. She nodded once at the chair, exchanged no words with Republicans across the aisle. Her face betrayed nothing. The chair, a seasoned Republican trying to hold the center, called the hearing to order with a voice that trembled beneath calm. "We are here today to discuss the legitimacy of our electoral process and the role misinformation played in inciting violence." He glanced at Greene, then at Crockett, and somewhere between them was the weight of a nation. Crockett flipped open her folder. Inside, highlighted in yellow, were transcripts from the DOJ, timelines of Trump's tweets, security briefings. Her preparation was meticulous. Her silence was strategic. She didn't need to perform. Greene would do that for both of them. And the stage was now hers to dismantle. Chapter 2. The Trigger. Greene accuses. Crockett prepares. Marjorie Taylor Greene spoke with the certainty of someone who believed shouting made it true. The real insurrection, she declared, was led by the left by people who used George Floyd and COVID to destabilize America. This committee is a fraud. Gasps filled the room. Reporters began scribbling. Gasps filled the room. Reporters began scribbling. She held up a printed tweet from 2020. "Look at this. Democrats said the election would be stolen unless they won. Isn't that coercion?" Crockett didn't look up. She uncapped her pen and made a quiet note. "And you know who helped rig the election? Mark Zuckerberg, the Chinese." The chair warned her to stay on topic. She smirked. Crockett remained still. The weight of restraint clung to her posture. She flipped to a page marked January 6th, call logs. Greene held up a flyer, dated Jan 5. This proves they planned violence against us. But it didn't. It was a flyer for a peaceful protest in Georgia. The headline read, "Voters deserve the truth." Crockett closed her folder gently and leaned into her mic. Are we allowed to submit actual facts into this proceeding, or just Fox News headlines and half-baked paranoia? Greene bristled. You want to silence me because I scare you. Crockett smiled. You mistake volume for power. I don't fear noise. I fear ignorance. And the temperature in the room dropped a degree. The air in the Oversight Committee chamber felt heavier than usual, like it knew it was about to be weaponized. Reporters lined the back row, cameras poised like predators. C-SPAN went live. Aides whispered in corners, their tablets lit with talking points and poll data. Every seat was filled. Every angle watched. Marjorie Taylor Greene entered first, her heels striking marble like war drums. Her team carried binders and printed screenshots of tweets. One aide clutched a laminated poster board with "The Real Coup" scrawled in all caps. Greene adjusted her blazer, looked directly at the cameras and smirked. She was here to perform, and she knew the lights were on. Jasmine Crockett arrived 10 minutes later. No entourage, no theatrics, just her, a single folder in hand and a stare that didn't flinch. She paused in the doorway, scanned the room, then walked calmly to her seat. The chair tapped the gavel once. This session will address alleged coordination to subvert the 2020 election and the weaponization of political narratives within the public domain. Greene raised an eyebrow at the phrase. Crockett didn't move. The chair continued. This is not a partisan witch hunt. This is oversight. A scoff from Greene. A cough from somewhere behind her. The chair glanced over but let it pass. Jasmine leaned back slightly, her folder unopened. Her eyes tracked Greene's fingertips, already twitching on the edge of a printed speech. This wasn't going to be a hearing, it was going to be a courtroom, and every seat was a witness stand. Outside the Capitol, protests gathered. One side chanted, "Stop the steal." The other held signs reading, "Justice for January 6th." But inside, everything boiled down to this moment. 2 women, 1 nation, and a microphone that couldn't filter truth from propaganda. Greene whispered to her aide, "She won't know what hit her." Crockett, hearing it, smiled just slightly. She was waiting for the mic to turn green. She didn't bring sound bites. She brought the receipts. Greene launched into her monologue with the flair of someone performing for 2 audiences, one in the room, the other online. Her voice was sharp, tinged with contempt, and every word was designed to inflame. The real insurrection, she began, wasn't on January 6th. It was months before, when Democrats used riots, race, and fear to manipulate a nation into silence. They let cities burn, they funded anarchists, and then they had the nerve to call it justice. Gasps whispered through the chamber. She held up a grainy printout of a protest from 2020. This is what they called peaceful. But a few selfies in the Capitol and suddenly we're terrorists. Crockett didn't lift her head, her pen move. D once, underlining a phrase on a typed page. Greene's voice grew louder. You don't care about truth, you care about power. You want to crucify Trump so you can hide your own corruption. She snapped open another document, waving it in the air like a weapon. Here's proof the FBI knew the laptop was real. Here's proof Zuckerberg spent millions to fortify Democrat districts. The chair leaned forward. Please stick to the scope of this hearing. I am on topic, she shot back. This hearing is a sham, and everyone knows it. Crockett flipped to a new tab. Her eyes scanned down a transcript labeled DOJ Pressure Campaign, December 27, 2020. A thin smile ghosted her lips. She closed the folder gently. She didn't need to yell. Greene was digging the hole herself. The chair tried again. Representative Greene, your time. I'm not done. You are now. The gavel dropped. Crockett finally looked up, locking eyes with Greene for the first time. Not a word passed her lips. But it was clear. She had already begun her cross-examination. And she hadn't said a thing. Yet. The chair tapped the gavel again. Representative Crockett, you may proceed. Silence. Jasmine Crockett rose slowly, her leather folder still closed. No papers in her hand, no theatrics, just her voice. You know, she began, soft and deliberate. We sit here under the pretense of law, but what we've just witnessed is not law. It's not oversight. It's propaganda. All eyes shifted. The camera feeds zoomed in. She wasn't just speaking, she was building a case. She took a slow step forward, toward the microphone, her tone sharpening like a scalpel. Representative Greene wants you to believe this is about Zuckerberg, or Soros, or CRT. But ask yourself, where in the Constitution are those names? Where in Title 18 is the word Antifa? Greene rolled her eyes, but Crockett didn't flinch. You keep throwing around buzzwords like they're statutes. But I came here to talk about the law, not a right-wing newsletter. A stir from the press bench. A senator shifted in his seat. Crockett continued. And then, there he was, Donald Trump, sitting at a gleaming desk in Mar-a-Lago, flags flanking him on both sides. His expression wasn't angry, it was amused. He smelled blood. Well, well, he drawled, voice amplified through the speakers. Seems like there's quite the show happening without me. Jasmine, you always were good at sound bites. Crockett didn't respond. Not yet. Trump leaned in. Let me be clear. I never told anyone to break the law. I told them to look into the law. Because what we saw in 2020 was a disgrace. Ballot dumps in the middle of the night. Observers being kicked out. Thousands of affidavits ignored. You call that democracy? Greene gave a little nod, as if he were the Messiah speaking scripture. Trump pressed on. I told the DOJ to investigate fraud. That's their job. If they didn't do it, they failed. But now you want to turn that into a crime? Since when is asking questions illegal in America? He paused, cocking his head. Or is it only illegal when I ask the questions? A few Republican staffers exchanged glances, uncertain whether to cheer or brace. The chair tried to interrupt. President Trump, but Trump waved off screen. Let her respond. Let's see if she's still as tough without her teleprompter. Crockett didn't blink. She stood, adjusted her jacket, and stepped toward the mic. The difference between a question and a threat, she said calmly, is power. When a man with a nation at his feet calls up the DOJ and says, just say the election was corrupt, that's not curiosity, that's coercion. Trump smiled, smug. You're a blogger with a law degree. Sit down. Crockett's eyes sharpened. No, Mr. Trump, she said slowly. I'm a constitutional shield. And you're what the founders warned us about. The room was dead quiet. Not even Greene moved. Trump chuckled. But there was a flicker of something in his eyes now. Not anger, not fear, recognition. He had met someone who knew the battlefield and wasn't afraid to bleed on it. The moment Jasmine sat back down, the air thick with her final words, a slow burning fury began to rise, tangible, charged, and barely contained. Marjorie Taylor Greene couldn't hold it any longer. She slapped her palm on the desk, hard enough that her mic let out a metallic pop. This is a damn witch hunt, she shouted. Gasps broke out across the chamber. Some aides jolted in their seats. The chair's gavel pounded once, then twice, desperate to restore order, but Greene was already standing. You people sit here pretending to care about democracy while you let criminals run our streets. You silence parents at school boards, and you spy on pastors from pulpits, and then you bring him, she jabbed a finger toward the monitor still showing Trump, into this like he's the devil himself. Her voice cracked, half rage, half theater, and entirely unhinged. Jasmine didn't move. The chair warned. Representative Greene, if you cannot compose yourself. No, Greene roared. Let me speak. She called him coercive. She called us dangerous. I've received death threats for standing up for the truth. Where's her investigation into Antifa? Into Hunter Biden? Into the DOJ spying on us? She turned to face Crockett directly. You sit there in your perfect suit with your Twitter army, and you act like you're some moral savior. But you're just another radical pretending to care about the law while you use it like a sword to cut down everyone who disagrees with you. Crockett finally spoke, low, clear, but laced with steel. I don't need to pretend, Congresswoman. The law is a sword. The difference is, I'm trained to wield it without swinging at shadows. A sudden hush fell. Greene's breath caught, throat tight, face flushed. The chair spoke again, more firmly. That's enough. Order, Representative Greene. One more outburst and I'll have no choice but to suspend your time. Greene stared at Jasmine with something far more dangerous than hatred. Wounded pride. But Crockett didn't flinch. Because in that moment the entire room had seen it. Greene had come to fight. Jasmine had come to win. And Trump's smirk on the screen. Gone. Replaced by something colder. Calculating. Because he'd just witnessed his fiercest defender lose her footing, and his greatest threat gain hers. They thought the storm had passed. The chamber was quieter now, artificially calm like the eye of a hurricane. But Jasmine had saved her sharpest blade for now. She tapped the digital folder on her tablet and looked up slowly, her voice unnervingly composed. For the record, I'd like to enter into evidence a communication received from the Office of Legal Counsel, dated February 17th, 3 days before Representative Greene made her now infamous threats on the Capitol steps. There was a pause, eyes narrowed across the dais, even the chair leaned in. Jasmine continued. The email contains internal memos warning specific members of Congress that invoking executive privilege on matters unrelated to their official duties, especially in defense of a private citizen, is not just irregular, it's unlawful. Click. The screen behind her blinked alive. An image appeared. The email. Redacted in parts, but the recipient line was clear. To Representative M.T. Greene, from Deputy Counsel, DOJ Oversight, subject, warning regarding potential misuse of congressional privilege. Gasps rippled through the room again. Journalists in the back scribbled frantically. A producer whispered into a mic, feeding a cable news ticker in real time. Greene sat frozen, eyes locked on the screen. Her jaw clenched. Jasmine spoke gently now, almost sorrowful. This email was sent directly to you, Congresswoman. You were warned. And yet you stood in front of the Capitol, camera rolling, and claimed you were speaking on behalf of the White House. You told the American people that Donald Trump had authorized your statements. She paused, letting the silence settle. You weren't defending your constituents. You were defending a man facing 91 felony counts after being explicitly told not to. A low murmur of shock spread. The chair tried to intervene. Representative Crockett, please confirm. Was this document verified? Jasmine didn't blink. Confirmed by the department just this morning. Stamped, certified, entered into the congressional record as Exhibit 14. Trump's video feed flickered. Static crackled for a moment, as though the tension itself had corrupted the line. Greene reached for her mic. No comment, she muttered. But her hand was trembling. In that moment, the entire courtroom understood. This wasn't politics anymore. It was perjury. It was obstruction. And Jasmine hadn't just exposed Greene's recklessness. She'd proven it, with her own inbox. The hearing room had gone silent again, but not out of peace. This was the silence before a dam breaks. The moment Jasmine Crockett dropped the DOJ-certified email into evidence, Donald Trump's video feed shifted from bored indifference to barely restrained rage. He leaned forward on the screen, his face filling the frame, his tone ice-cold. "Oh, I see what this is now," he growled, his voice distorted by the echo of his remote feed. "This isn't oversight. This is an ambush, a witch hunt staged by leftist radicals, drunk on power and fake news." The chair reached for the gavel. "Mr. Trump, this is not your time to speak." But Trump wasn't listening. "You've got her, this, whatever she is, sitting there throwing around Old evidence like it means something, like any of this is real. It's not. It's all fabricated, a hoax. He pointed directly into the camera, as if jabbing a finger through the screen at Jasmine. He pointed directly into the camera, as if jabbing a finger through the screen at Jasmine. I don't recognize this committee. I don't recognize that woman. And I don't recognize any of these lies you're pushing as legitimate. Jasmine folded her hands calmly, but her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in surgical precision. She was waiting, letting him hang himself with every word. Representative Goldman leaned toward his mic, eyes wide. Mr. Trump, are you aware you're currently under oath? Trump scoffed. Don't lecture me about oaths. I've taken more oaths to this country than any of you phonies ever will. The chair banged the gavel again. This is your final warning. Any further outbursts will result in immediate termination of your remote appearance. But Trump just laughed, cold and ugly. Go ahead. Cut the feed. That's what tyrants do, right? Silence the truth. But you can't silence me. You'll never silence me. Jasmine finally leaned in, her voice like a calm tide rolling in after a storm. No one's silencing you, Mr. Trump. We're just letting you speak long enough to reveal the truth you keep trying to bury. Trump froze. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. His face twitched, just slightly. Then the screen blinked. Static, disconnected. The chair turned to the committee clerk. Was that technical or? The clerk shook their head. He pulled the plug. Dead silence. Jasmine turned back to the mic. Well, she said softly, for someone who claims to be silenced, he sure made a lot of noise. Laughter broke out, half shock, half release. But beneath it, a new tension was building, because the nation had just watched something historic. A former president losing control. Not of the room, not of the narrative, but of himself. It started with a smirk. Trump's face, beamed in via video, loomed across the monitors like a storm front rolling in. At first he leaned, back in his chair, arms folded, eyes narrowed with the smug calm of a man convinced nothing could touch him. But Jasmine's words, measured, deliberate, laced with the sting of documented truth, had started to chip at that armor. Then came the document drop. A Department of Justice memo, cross-referenced with internal communications and FEC filings, a paper trail too clean, too sharp, too real to ignore. Trump leaned forward suddenly. His face filled the screen. Excuse me, he cut in, voice rising. I don't know where you're getting this garbage, but none of that means what you think it does. You're twisting everything. The chair's gavel cracked sharply. Mr. Trump, you will wait your turn. But Trump was already in full tilt. This woman, Crockett or whatever, she's a disgrace. This whole thing is a sham. You think I don't see what's happening here? You people are obsessed. You've been after me since 2015. He jabbed a finger toward the camera. You're liars. Every single one of you. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She simply leaned forward and spoke into the mic, her voice low and unshakable. You're not angry because I lied. You're angry because I brought receipts. A wave of audible murmurs spread through the chamber. Cameras snapped. Journalists looked up from their notes. Trump's face contorted. He opened his mouth, but the chair raised the gavel again. Mr. Trump, any further outbursts and your remote privileges will be revoked. Trump didn't respond. He stared into the camera, unblinking, jaw tight. Then, suddenly, click. The video feed cut to black. For a moment, the entire room froze. The committee clerk tapped his keyboard. Was that him? The chair asked. The clerk nodded. He disconnected. Silence. A breath. Then Jasmine spoke, quiet but piercing. I guess when facts enter the room, the noise has to leave. The audience erupted. The sound was diffy. Errant now, no longer surprise or tension, but a release, a collective exhale. Some laughed, some applauded. Cameras swiveled to catch every expression, and outside, across the country, screens lit up with a single moment. Donald Trump, walking away. Not by force, by choice. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't the loudest voice in the room. Outside the Capitol, the August air had grown thick, hot, and restless. The crowd wasn't just a gathering anymore, it was a pressure cooker of rage and disbelief, coiled tight around the steps of power. Trump's supporters, draped in flags and slogans, pressed against metal barricades with fists clenched and phones raised. They'd come for a show of strength, but what they'd witnessed on livestream, a public unraveling, Trump cutting the feed mid-hearing, left them volatile, confused, and angry. "He didn't leave! He was silenced!" Someone yelled, voice cracking over a megaphone. "No, he shut it down himself!" Another voice pushed back. The line between protesters and agitators blurred quickly. What started as shouting became shoving, tempers ignited like dry leaves under flame. A man in a faded red cap slammed his fist into a CNN camera shouting, "You're part of it! You're all part of it!" Journalists backed away, clutching their gear as police began tightening their line. Riot shields glinted under the afternoon sun. Officers barked warnings, but the crowd didn't budge. They were fueled by something bigger than grievance now. They were reeling from humiliation. The myth of untouchability had cracked live on screen, and reality was rushing in too fast. Inside the building, Jasmine could hear the noise swelling through the marble walls. She glanced toward the tall windows as the sound of chants turned into scattered screams. "Aid, it's getting worse out there, ma'am." Jasmine's fingers tightened around the witness folder in front of her. "They're not here for truth," she said quietly. "They're here for revenge. Aid, do you want to delay testimony?" She shook her head, eyes key, old and focused. "No, that's what they want. Chaos, fear. We stay in the room. We finish this." Meanwhile, a young protester, barely 20, was pushed to the ground by Capitol Police as chants of "Let Trump speak" turned into a chorus of curses. Above it all, the camera towers kept rolling, broadcasting not just a trial, but the unraveling of control, live for millions. Back inside, the door to the hearing room clicked shut behind security, and Jasmine turned back to the mic, refusing to flinch. Because the louder the world outside got, the more powerful her silence became.